Today, the topic under discussion are the descending tracts. And by the terminology, we've already basically have some knowledge that these are basically the fasciculi, the tracts, or we can also refer to them as kind of roads that are basically taking down the messages from the higher centers of the brain towards the target organs. In our previous lecture, we went through the particular tracts, particularly known as the ascending tracts, and they're basically gathering the information from the periphery through the receptor organs, and they are taking the messages back to the higher centers of the brain with the help of the ascending tracts. We've gone through the different stimuli that basically produce the action potentials in these tracts and how these tracts basically send the different sensations, may it be the pain, the temperature, the vibration, or the pressure sensations to the higher centers of the brain. In the same way, once these stimuli, they basically reach the higher centers of the brain, they are integrated upon, and then the function of the descending tract basically starts on from there on. They're going to basically interpret those messages, and after that, these tracts are basically going to bring down the information or bring down the commands that are sent back to the anterior gray column in the spinal cord. And obviously, different sensations have different tracts that we'll be discussing throughout in this particular lecture. So we went through this reflex mechanism in our previous lecture in detail, and we went through the complete discussion regarding how once a stimuli is basically sensed by an individual, be it be a visual stimuli, as you can see over here, and the person senses that he or she is in danger, then that messages are basically sent back to the higher centers in the cortical regions of the brain. And then obviously, from there on, the sensory input, once it is integrated inside the higher centers of the brain, the afferent neurons are basically responsible for taking down these messages, and the integration takes place in the cortical regions of the brain over here. Moreover, we have the efferent neurons. Now, the function of the efferent neurons is just to incorporate this integration, and these commands are basically sent down. The function of these afferent neurons, and these afferent neurons, when they're bundled up together, they are known as the descending tracts, or they are known as the fasciculi inside the brain. So when we look at this complete model of how the nervous system works, or what is the functionality of the nervous system, we just have this brief idea that we have a sensory input over here, and then we have the integration centers, and moreover, we have the motor output. So these are the three important components that we have. The descending tracts are basically motor in their nature, and obviously that is how they're going to control the different activities. Either they are voluntary in their action, and we can have another set of motor activities which are basically involuntary in their action. So the descending tracts are basically performing the voluntary as well as the involuntary functions over here. Now, knowing this background knowledge, or knowing this baseline knowledge over here, we know that we have the ascending tracts that we have already gone through in detail. And if you want to have the complete knowledge, you should just refer back to this lecture on the ascending tracts, and where you'll find all the ascending tracts and how they send back information to the higher centers of the brain. And then further on, once the integration takes place in the cortical regions, then the messages or the commands are sent back by the descending tracts. And then we have this another set of tracts, which are basically the intersegmental tracts. Now, what is the function of these intersegmental tracts? When we talk about the motor functionality of the spinal cord, we must keep in mind this particular thing, that we have the facilitations that have to be provided to the particular set of muscles. And apart from that, we got to have the inhibitory actions on these muscles as well. So whenever there is facilitation provided to the set of muscles which are provided by, say, the thoracic segment of the spinal cord, then the cervical segments are inhibited at that particular period of time. So these intersegmental information transfer has to be present throughout the spinal cord, and these neurons basically provide information regarding the posture, regarding the balance, whenever we are performing some sort of voluntary actions, or even when we are performing the involuntary actions, or whenever there is a parasympathetic outflow that occurs specifically at the sacral complexes.